So my mic is not working and I'll have to just record this video without a mic. I just hope that I'm going to be able to speak loudly enough so that you guys can hear me. This is why my head is almost cut off, because I have to keep the camera close enough so that at least my voice is captured clearly. I'm sure we've all heard of the saying that the rich keep getting richer while the poor keep getting poorer. Well, you know what? The same applies to the classroom setting, because usually the bright students keep getting brighter while the weak students keep getting weaker. Welcome to today's video, where I'll be talking about the role of a teacher in the classroom setting. First of all, let me tell you that this topic is very close to my heart. So I remember that back when I was a student myself and I was just in my first year of law school. So at that time I had written an article about the role of a teacher, and I was obviously not very confident that it would get published, but fortunately it did. And I'm going to share the link in the description box below. Now let me begin with the words of a very renowned Pakistani author, Mr. Tariq Khan, who is also a professor at a university in the US. At one of his book launch events, I had the opportunity to ask him what he thought the role of a teacher was. And honestly, I don't think I will ever forget his response, because he said that at the commencement of every session, he would tell his students that if you're failing, I'm failing. These few words clearly sum up what the role of a teacher usually should be. But unfortunately, except for a very few teachers, most teachers don't think of their role in this way. तो यूजुअली क्या होता है कि जो स्टूडेंट्स ऑलरेडी अच्छा परफॉर्म कर रहे होते हैं, ऑलरेडी क्लास में एक्टिवली पार्टिसिपेट कर रहे होते हैं, वही स्टूडेंट्स टीचर्स के फेवरेट बन जाते हैं. एंड दीज आर द सेम स्टूडेंट्स हु टेंड टू गेट सिलेक्टेड फॉर competitions and all sorts of activities most of the time. So first of all, the point that I am trying to make, and as always I would like to clarify that this is just my opinion. Obviously I don't like to impose my opinion on anybody, so you are free to disagree. But the point that I'm trying to make is that these few students usually are successful in class and overall in various activities, not because of the fact that the teacher has actually played a major role. यानी teacher का इसमें कोई खास कमाल नहीं होता है and कोई contribution नहीं होती है. It's just that either they have family support or they're taking tuitions privately, and there can be many other factors, one of them being natural ability and of course hard work. But most of the time what we see is that the teacher has a very minimal role, if at all, to play in the success of those students who are already performing well academically before they ever join that particular teacher's class. And the point that I'm trying to make is that हमारे यहाँ पर उल्टा होता है. जिन students को actually ज़रूरत होती है that they should participate in activities so that they get groomed and polished, instead they're never picked. मसला ये होता है कि जो already quiet होते हैं वो और ज़्यादा खामोश हो जाते हैं. जिन स्टूडेंट्स को एक्चुअली ज़्यादा अटेंशन की ज़रूरत होती है वो नहीं मिलती, बिकॉज यूजुअली सारा अटेंशन उन्हीं स्टूडेंट्स पर जा रहा होता है जो ऑलरेडी एक्टिवली पार्टिसिपेट करते हैं एंड इंटरैक्ट करते हैं. एंड दैट्स वेरी नेचुरल ऑब्वियसली ऑन द पार्ट ऑफ द टीचर, बिकॉज from my experience I can tell that it takes a lot of intentional effort and deliberate effort on the part of the teacher to try to focus on those students who actually need attention. Now I'm going to share a few points that I usually use in identifying a good teacher. Actually, the first point might not sound very realistic, but I think it's very, very important. So I teach a subject which is usually considered by most students as boring and dull. And I think you can guess which subject I'm talking about. Well, it's law. And I always felt this responsibility of making sure that the subject is somehow made interesting for the students. So I would never presume that the students should and would automatically like the subject and feel interested unless I as a teacher actually put in the effort to make the subject interesting and make them love the subject. So ideally a teacher should be teaching in such a manner that even those students who have come to the class with some preconceived notions that they hate the subject, they should ideally end up loving the subject. And let me share from my own experience that I have taken, for example, a course in economic policy, and a huge part of that course deals with monetary policy as well. That I used to literally dread taking this subject, but I was lucky enough to get a teacher who literally not only made me interested in the subject, but my entire perspective has changed, and instead I've fallen in love with the subject. And that's the point that I'm trying to make. The second quality that ideally I would look for in a teacher is that he or she should adopt a learning by doing approach, because this really helps to reinforce concepts. And obviously there are so many ways that a teacher can make the students engage actively with the content instead of, just making them passively go through it. Sad part is that most of the time students don't realize that it is through giving presentations that they're actually going to learn so many important life skills. Now, the difference between this active versus passive approach brings me to the importance of giving presentations. I'll be very honest that most of the times it was very disappointing to see that students usually don't want to give presentations. They would, just run away from it. So instead of seeing this as a good opportunity to actually polish their concepts as well as their speaking skills, and that too in the presence of a learned facilitator. Now obviously this video is not a video about the importance of giving presentations, but let me just try to sum it up with this quote which says that if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. And honestly, later on in life, when we start working, then we realize that it is these very presentation skills that, actually matter. And whenever I would see students who are hesitant to give presentations, honestly, my question is, do you really think that, your 4-year degree or your 5-year degree, or if you're doing a postgraduate degree, do you really think that it's going to be of any value if after your degree, if after spending 4 to 5 years in university, you don't even develop basic presentation skills? The third point that you should keep in mind is that a good teacher always gives feedback. And honestly, you'll be very lucky if you actually come across such a teacher, because most of the times teachers don't bother to actually tell students where they can improve. There is another quote, and I don't remember the author of that quote, but it goes as follows, that teaching is influenced by the teacher. And I think I can strongly relate to this particular quote from my experience of being a student. Once I remember when I was taking the course macroeconomics for the very first time in my life, and I remember that in that particular class I was the only student who did not have any background in economics, far from macroeconomics. And as far as the other students were concerned, I clearly remember that all of them already had a master's degree in economics, and you can imagine how intimidated I felt by that. And I clearly remember how my teacher had motivated me that it does not matter where you start, all that matters is where you end. So it's okay if you're starting with zero knowledge. All these few words were like magic for me, because I remember feeling so confident that it does not matter that I don't know anything and the others know so much more than me. What really matters is where you stand in terms of learning at the end of the semester. And so this is what I meant when I said that teaching is strongly influenced by the teacher. One more quality that I've noticed in a good teacher is that he or she would make sure that the student who is the quietest of all is always encouraged to speak up. And then when he or she does speak up, the teacher usually tries to encourage and, appreciate whatever they have said, even if what they have said is not entirely correct. Now, the point of this video is just that, even if you're an average student, but if you're in the hands of a good teacher, you can really flourish. The best teacher is one whose influence extends well beyond the classroom, and somebody who actually inspires a lifelong love for learning and actually makes the student curious enough to go beyond the subject independently.